Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Later today, if you wish, or at some point in time on demand, I imagine you'll be able to watch a Fox News hosted town hall hosted by Harrison Faulkner in Metro Atlanta, recorded yesterday. It was an all-woman town hall with Donald Trump, of course, as the central figure. The only problem is only his Republican friends were invited. This according to the UK Independent, not exactly a town hall, more like a rally, I guess you would say, with females, the only invited guests, about 100 or so. Donald Trump spoke at this Georgia town hall Tuesday to address women's issue. It turned out that the, quote, town was populated by only GOP backers hand-selected by Fox News. Again, this reporting from the Independent, Eric Garcia reporting on this. The day after the former president jammed to his curated playlist as two of his supporters fell ill at a rally in Oaks, Pennsylvania, and just hours after he delivered a free association performance at the Economic Club of Chicago. By the way, we have to talk about that. He arrived at the Reed Barn in Cumming, Georgia, located in Forsyth County, about 45 minutes outside of Atlanta. These are the areas where Trump must run up his totals on Election Day if he is to win. Ostensibly, the town hall run by Fox News was meant to soften his image with female voters. If Trump is to have any hope of flipping the state, he will need to improve his image with women. We do have polling on that, by the way. We'll try and dive into that a little bit later in the show. Garcia reports as soon as Trump arrived in the rustic barn with its wood panels, he received rapturous applause throughout the town hall hosted by Harris Faulkner. I called her Harrison, didn't I? Harris Faulkner. Questioners seemed enraptured by him. This fanatical quote, I feel like when he came out, everybody was so excited to see him and his enthusiasm. Emily Harris telling Eric Garcia with The Independent, it was just great to be in the room with him, Garcia then writes. And there was good reason given that many of the attendees in an intimate setting were from Republican groups around the area whom Fox News invited. At least that's what some of the women told The Independent. That same woman we just got a quote from there, her name again, Emily Harris. She said, we got a personal invitation from Fox News. We were ecstatic. We were all very, very excited. It was the same case with Cynthia Brown from Cumming, who was the treasurer for Republican Women of Forsyth County. We love Donald Trump and President Trump and what he has done in America and what he is doing for women. All right, so I could sit here and focus on the Stepford handpicked ladies for this town hall, and I'll get into some of the rhetoric coming from that town hall, which we, again, will not see until Fox airs it. 11 o'clock, I believe it airs today on Harris Faulkner's time slot. You may be listening well after that. Of course, we'll have the audio for it the next day as well. I want to focus more on some of the demographic data and what is fueling the Trump campaign's need, they're seeing it, to deal with some degradation of voter support. We are hearing so much noise about the degradation of vote support amongst Hispanic voters, black men in particular within the Democratic Party, which is actually statistically microscopic, fractional compared to the degradation, the loss of voter support that Donald Trump is getting from white women. John Berman goes into this on CNN and then dives into the data with their number cruncher. Take a listen.
This election is close. Everyone knows that. But what might be most notable about 2024 are the structural shifts that we might be seeing in the electorate. Who generally votes for Democrats? Who generally votes for Republicans? It might all be changing. Here to explain what we are seeing, CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton. Look, we've been talking about black voters the last few days and some shifts there, but there are significant shifts that benefit Vice President Harris when it comes to women.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So, if you look at, is Harris doing better than Biden 2020? White men, she's not. Women of color, she's not. Men of color, she's not. But among white women, in fact, she is. In fact, it's to a historic degree. So let's take a look here. The GOP's margin among white women, look, Romney won him by 9, all right? Trump in 2016 won him by 6. You go back 4 years ago, Trump won him by 7. Look now, look how much lower Trump's margin is among white women. Look, he still leads, but it's well within the margin of error. It's just a point. He's doing 6 points worse than he did 4 years ago. In fact, he's doing the worst, if this holds, for a GOP candidate this century among white women, John.
Well, how much do white women matter in the electorate?
So this is the whole thing, right? How much do they matter? If you were to break it down, white women, white men, women of color, men of color, white women make up the plurality of the electorate, 36%. So, yesterday we were talking about those massive gains that Donald Trump was making among black men, black women. But the bottom line is they actually make up a considerably smaller portion of the electorate than white women do. So when we're talking about 5, 6 point shifts, 7 point shifts in Kamala Harris's direction, we're talking about that among a major part of the electorate, and that can actually move the overall electorate more than ginormous shifts among a considerably smaller part of the electorate.
You can just
John.
do the math. More than double the impact, depending on how it all spaces itself out. Why?
Why? I think that this gets at a pretty good reason why. All right. Abortion is the top voting issue. We're going to look at Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, on average, where 80% or north of the voters are white. Look at this. The percentage of women who say that abortion is the top voting issue come November, 27%. Look at this gender gap. Among men in those states, it's just 7%. I think what we're talking about here is after Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, white women in the suburban areas, in these key battleground states, have very much turned against Republicans. And we're seeing in the polling right now, because Kamala Harris is doing historically well, at least this century, for a Democratic candidate among white women. And of course, they make up a very large portion of the electorate. If she wins, it could ultimately be because she did so well with white women.
But I also think it's not just about abortion. I think it's about divisive rhetoric. Remember the divisive rhetoric finger wag we were getting? Anytime somebody tries to take literally a shot at the former president, it's about the divisive rhetoric. They don't police their own divisive rhetoric or his, but they're wanting to talk about divisive rhetoric from anyone who is anti-Trump. That would be, by the way, Republicans who are against Trump, or progressives, moderates, liberals, Democrats who are trying to see to it that he doesn't somehow win the Oval Office again. It's about divisive rhetoric. I think that's what drives women voters away from Donald Trump. Divisive rhetoric like this.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
That's right, the military that he'd like to use against U.S. citizens who he disagrees with.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. I got along great with all. I handled them. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside.
Never mind the fact that he was sending COVID tests to Vladimir Putin, his buddy, when we were struggling to find them here in the United States. Never mind the fact that President Xi in China ran him like a dog on a leash and had COVID. Remember, we had COVID supplies going to China as well in the early offing. And of course, he wanted to walk the tightrope simultaneously and play the tariffs game, which we paid for, not President Xi and not China, while simultaneously slurring Chinese and Asians in general because he had to deflect blame from his COVID response to someone else, and it couldn't at all be him. Yeah, so I think this divisive rhetoric thing is really what is hurting him. Here's the problem. He even went to this little safe, cozy, all women, all Republican women gathering and talked about the enemy from within with women as well. Maya King at the New York Times reporting that former President Donald J. Trump reiterated his belief that Democrats are, quote, the enemy from within during a Fox News town hall on Tuesday, billed as a conversation about women's issues. Tim Walz had a response to that, reminding his supporters at a rally, yeah, he's talking about you, the American people.
So dangerous. Yesterday, he went on Fox News. That's a safe place for him. He went on there, and he suggested that he is going to send the military against the enemy from within. Now, I want you to think about it. In other words, Americans who don't support him. Just to be clear, if any of your neighbors or friends or anybody thinks about that, you know who he's talking about? He's talking about you. He's talking about you. He's talking about someone who comes to a rally to express their love and their commitment to our democracy. Donald Trump sees that as an enemy. All right? So I have to tell you, as someone who wore this nation's uniform proudly, as someone who now is the commander-in-chief of the Minnesota National Guard, the idea of sending U.S. military personnel against American citizens makes me sick to my stomach. I'll tell you what. We'll let the lawyers decide if what he said was treason, but what I know is it's a call for violence, plain and simple. Yep. And it's pretty damn un-American, if you ask me. So look, if anybody wants to pretend that this is a normal conversation that Donald Trump is having, just dispel that. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said, "No one has ever been more dangerous to this country than Donald Trump, and he is a fascist to his core." Let that sink in, and don't be a damn bit afraid of saying it, because that's exactly who he is.
Right.
That's exactly who he is.
I'm really glad to hear Tim Walz talk like that. Like, do not back down from saying what is fact. Water is wet. Trump is fascist-ish, if not outright. Kamala Harris at a rally even used Donald Trump's audio. How many times have you heard somebody who's running for office use the opponent's own rhetoric, literally the audio, in their rally? That's exactly what she did.
And so after all these years, we know who Donald Trump is. He is someone who will stop at nothing to claim power for himself. And you don't have to take my word for it. I've said for a while now, watch his rallies. Listen to his words. He tells us who he is.
Yep.
And he tells us what he would do if he is elected president. So here tonight, I will show you one example of Donald Trump's worldview and intentions. Please roll the clip.
The worst people are the enemies from within. The enemy from within. Those people are more dangerous, the enemy from within, than Russia and China. These people should be put in jail the way they talk about our judges and our justices. Now, if you had one really violent day, one rough hour, and I mean real rough. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
So you heard his words. You heard his words coming from him. He's talking about the enemy within Pennsylvania. He's talking about the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country. It's a serious issue. He is saying that he would use the military to go after them. Think about this. And we know who he would target. And we know who he would target because he has attacked them before. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. Election officials who refuse to cheat by filling extra votes and finding extra votes for him. Judges who insist on following the law instead of bending to his will. This is among the reasons I believe so strongly that a second Trump term would be a huge risk for America and dangerous. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. And he is out for unchecked power. That's what he's looking for. Yep. He wants to send the military after American citizens. He has worked to prevent women from making their own health care decisions and threaten your fundamental freedoms and rights, like the freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride.
And the thing that should be sobering to anybody who is even remotely undecided here is, in Trump's lone term as president, he was insulated, or I should say we were insulated from him, from his innermost desires, by career politicians, career Republicans who had, they would say part of the deep state, part of the swamp now. We were insulated from him by those folks who no longer wish to have anything to do with him. Remember, he was going to only hire the best people. Well, the best of the best people that he chose now want nothing to do with a second Trump presidency, so he's going to have to reach lower. Go low. Yeah, he's going to have to reach deeper into the crevices, to the couch cushions, to come out with the spare change that he's finding them. Those that are sticking around from the first term, the Stephen Millers, yeah, that is the best of the bunch. It only gets worse from there. And there's going to be a lot more of his lapdog types who aren't going to be a check on his innermost desires, his darkest views and personal whims. That's what I think drives the closure of the gap between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump when it comes to white women voters. The Republican Party has spent decades instilling fear in criminals running loose on the streets. The Willie Horton ad from the 1984 presidential election. It was the October surprise back then. Even Donald Trump talking about rampant crime in the streets, which, by the way, is way down since he left the Oval Office. It turns out that instilling that fear in criminals running amok is actually what's working against Donald Trump now, because it turns out all that fear that the right has ratcheted up amongst female voters actually does have them fearful of a criminal and his gang running amok. Not in the streets to take purses and wallets, but inside the Beltway to take away personal freedoms and the ability to vote in 2028 and in future years. More on show after this. America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. If you'd like, you can call the show, leave a comment, 404-919-2725, at Ron Show ATL on Twitter X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. Yeah, I think the degradation that Donald Trump is seeing with white women, the largest voting bloc when we're breaking down by gender and demography in this country, the plurality, the leading plurality, we'll say. I think that problem he's having with that huge chunk of voters is the violent rhetoric. Oh, not just the rhetoric, but like what the rhetoric actually does. You know, he was asked about this yesterday. We're talking about that economic forum in Chicago that was hosted by Bloomberg, the peaceful transition of power that never was.
I'll ask you then about something else. Yeah. Business people here in this room, business people, capital markets, they all like the rule of law. They like certainty. The Chinese, who you mentioned, other dictators,
right?
They don't like it when things go wrong, but they like it when things go wrong in America. If you look at the events of January the 6th, 2021, it showed to many people America's democracy was unruly and violent. Only 3 weeks to go to the election. Will you commit now to respecting and encouraging a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
You had a peaceful transfer of power. You had a peaceful...
Oh my God!
Come on, President Trump. You had a peaceful transfer of power compared with Venezuela, but it was by far the worst transfer of power for a long time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because this is what they like to do. This is what they like to do. It's very interesting.
The question, President Trump, is: would you respect the decision?
When I found out about this interview, I did a little check. This is a man that has not been a big Trump fan over the years.
Not
so I had
answering
a
the question.
choice. Do I do this interview or not? I'm glad I did it. But do I do this interview or do I disappoint a lot of people? Because I know a lot of people in the audience. But his view is very different than mine. Let me just say.
He's talking about John Micklethwait, who is the editor-in-chief at Bloomberg, former editor-in-chief at The Economist. He just doesn't want to answer an uncomfortable question, so he attacks the questioner.
And some people went to the Capitol. And a lot of strange things happened there. A lot of strange things with people being waved into the Capitol by police.
My God.
With people screaming, go in, with that never got into trouble. You know, I don't want to mention names, but you know who they are. A lot of strange things happened. But you had a peaceful, very peaceful. I left the morning that I was supposed to leave. I went to Florida, and you had a very peaceful transfer. This was not and I'll tell you what, those people that did go down, which was a tiny fraction of the people that went to Washington.
Keep talking like this, man, because it's apparent white women voters, period, don't like men who can't accept responsibility for their actions.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Kamala Harris, again dodging the media, decided to sit down with Charlamagne the God and the Breakfast Club to do a near 1 hour, it was more than 1 hour, town hall, taking calls from the audience as well, just dodging the people. My God, will she ever be available to answer questions from the media and the common American? Obviously, I'm being facetious, cynical even. Kamala Harris has made herself available. In fact, later today, she sits down with Fox News' Bret Baier for a one-on-one interview that will air on Fox News. Now, how they slice and dice it, don't know. It'll be interesting to see when the Trump sit-down from yesterday in Forsyth County is presented. Will the enemy from within quip that the New York Times reported on, will that make the finished product, or will that be on the cutting room floor? Don't know. But we do have all the audio from the Charlamagne the God Breakfast Club interview with Kamala Harris. Let's go through some of those finer points.
Now, one thing they've been saying, a lot of your press hits get criticized. Folks say you come off as very scripted. They say you like to stick to your talking points. And some media says you have...
That would be called discipline.
Ooh, okay. Speak to that.
But go on.
No, I was going to say some people say you have an inability to fearlessly say who you are and what you believe. I know that's not true. But what do you say to that criticism? And is it fair for SNL to make fun of it?
Hasn't Maya Rudolph been wonderful?
Yes.
I think I have nothing but admiration for the comedy, and I think it's important to be able to laugh at yourself and each other.
But what do you say to people who say...
In the spirit of obviously comedy and not belittling people as my opponent would do.
But what do you say to people who say you stay on the talking points?
I would say you're welcome.
Yes.
I mean, listen, here's the thing. I love having conversations, which is why I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon. And the reality is that there are certain things that must be repeated to ensure that I have everyone know what I stand for and the issues that I think are at stake in this election. Mm-hmm. And so it requires repetition. Some people say that until someone has heard the same thing at least 3 times, it just doesn't stay with you. So repetition is important. And for that reason, yes, at my rallies, I say the same thing when I go to Detroit as I do in Philly, as I do wherever I am, to make sure that people hear and receive what I think are some of the most critical issues that are at stake in this election.
I mean, it's not important to stay on message, right? To reiterate, I mean, listen, we have known this. I call this the evil triumvirate from the 1990s. The Newt Gingrich, Rush Limbaugh, Frank Luntz triumvirate. We all know who Newt Gingrich was. We all know who Rush Limbaugh was. Not a lot of people know who Frank Luntz is. Frank Luntz is like this wordsmith. He takes terminology and uses them, I don't want to say to weaponize, but to alter reality, to say things that aren't necessarily true, but boy, they sure do sound good. They fit on a bumper sticker, et cetera, and so on. Yeah, that triumvirate right there turned the tide politically in this country in the 1990s by saying things that may not have necessarily been true, but evoked emotion from a base of voters that drove them to vote a certain way. Kamala Harris is just staying on message. It's not that she's unable to go into deeper policy substantive discussion. By the way, a lot of that's already posted on our campaign website. You don't hear sweeping, I'll handle it, we'll take care of that. That's her opponent saying the depthless stuff. She's actually coming out with substantive policy positions and, of course, sharing them on her website. And while out here doing town halls and campaign rallies and one-on-one interviews, just not diving into the weeds because time is limited at all of those.
There has to be a high level of anxiety, too, when you have these conversations, though, because you are running for president.
I mean, you know what? There's certainly a lot of, I feel the weight of the moment and my role. I feel an extraordinary weight of responsibility right now to do everything I can. I'm telling you, Charlemagne, when I go to bed at night, I almost every night, in addition to my prayers, will ask, have I done everything I could do today? This is a margin of error race. It's tight. I'm going to win. But it's tight. And, you know, what is at stake is truly profound and almost and historic, many would say. And it's about, you know, some people would say this lofty notion of supporting and preserving our democracy. But it is about real issues that affect people every day, like whether we're going to maintain a $35 cap on insulin for our seniors, whether we're going to continue to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices to bring them down, whether we are going to have, as my opponent would have, a formalized stop and frisk policy, for which he has said if a police department does not do it, they should be defunded or not. There is so much at stake, whether America is going to stand on its principles around the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity and stand with our allies around the world, or whether we're going to admire dictators and send during the height of COVID and the pandemic COVID tests that nobody could get to the president of Russia for his personal use when black people were dying every day by the hundreds during that time.
Yeah, I feel like that one has gone over people's heads, the fact that he was sending COVID tests to Putin.
I mean, you know, your listeners, the people we know, the number of people who lost their grandparents and parents. Remember what that was like during the height of COVID? And a lot of it, people were scrambling for the resources and needed tests. And Donald Trump, during that time, secretly sent COVID tests to the president of Russia, who, by the way, do not forget, in the 2016 election, because I was a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee when we investigated it, targeted black voters in 2016 with mis and disinformation to discourage black people from voting in that election. And
it worked.
And this is just another of the very many examples of who Donald Trump really is and the danger he presents to real people.
Sending COVID tests to Russia, that doesn't sound very America first at all. But it's not just you versus Trump, it's you versus misinformation.
Yes, that's true.
Right? And one of the biggest pieces of misinformation, one of the biggest allegations against you is that you targeted and locked up thousands of black men in San Francisco for weed. Some say you did it to boost your career. Some say you did it out of pure hate for black men. Please tell us the facts. What's the facts of that situation?
It's just simply not true. And what public defenders who are around those days will tell you, I was the most progressive prosecutor in California on marijuana cases.
As a matter of fact, Trump campaign runs ads talking about how progressive a prosecutor she was, right?
And would not send people to jail for simple possession of weed. And as vice president, have been a champion for bringing marijuana down on the schedule. So instead of it being ranked up there with heroin, we bring it down. And my pledge is, as president, I will work on decriminalizing it because I know exactly how those laws have been used to disproportionately impact certain populations and specifically black men.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move forward ahead a little bit. Charlemagne got some questions from the talkback feature that they use, I think, on the iHeartRadio app.
Let's take some, when I call, let's go to the talkback feature.
My question for Kamala is, why are we, and I say we because my tax dollars is sending the money, why are we sending money to other countries when we desperately need it in our own country for homeless, housing, resources, for whatever? That is my determining factor if I vote for Kamala or not.
That's one of the reasons the America First rhetoric resonates, because nobody in America would complain about where money was going if American citizens' everyday needs were being met. So what do you say to that?
We can do it all, and we do. So first of all, I maintain very strongly America should never pull ourselves away from our responsibility as a world leader. And that is in the best interest of our national security and each one of us as Americans and our standing in the world. That being said, we also have an obligation to American citizens, obviously, and people who are here to meet their everyday needs and challenges, which is why, for example, we have done the work in the last 4 years of bringing down the cost of prescription medication, whether it be $35 a month for seniors for insulin or $2,000 a year cap on prescription medication. What we have done that has been about putting $17 billion in our HBCUs. I am proud to be the first HBCU vice president of the United States. I intend to be the first HBCU president of the United States. Those resources are about sending them to centers of academic excellence that I know them to be. The work that I continue to do is about increasing access to capital for our small businesses. It is about increasing the opportunity for home ownership, knowing that Black people are 40% less likely to be homeowners in America. We have a history of legal and procedural obstacles to that home ownership, starting with the fact nobody got 40 acres and a mule, to redlining, to issues that this Detroit area and people around the country know to be real. So part of my plan is that we're going to give people a $25,000 down payment assistance to get their foot in the door to buy a home for first-time home buyers. The work that I'm going to do to increase housing supply in America, knowing that that's one of the reasons that rents and housing prices are jacked up, and to work with the private sector, cut through the red tape, and work to build more housing, 3 million before the end of my first term. And I give these examples, and there are many more which I will offer. So, for example, the work that I will do to extend the child tax credit to $6,000 for young families during the first year of their child's life. Because as you and I both know, our families all have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources. So by expanding the child tax credit to the first year of a child's life to $6,000, that gives that young family the ability to buy a car seat or a crib or clothes, the things that are so important during that critical phase of that child's development, so that they can get on the road and actually have a chance at succeeding.
You know, you said we can do it all, but can we? Because, Tupac famously said, we got money for war, but can't feed the poor, right? And I saw President Obama say last week that, you really shouldn't expect, a president to rid the world of all of its problems. And so is it fair to tell people, hey, we can do it all? Because that's when people get disappointed, when things don't happen.
But I think President Obama is absolutely correct, but it doesn't mean we can't do anything.
That's right.
So when I talk about extending the child tax credit, when I was vice president, I pushed that we would do it during our first year. And we reduced Black child poverty in America by 50%. We did that. We can do that. My plan that is about building up home ownership in the Black community, we can do that. My work that has been about increasing access to capital, bringing billions more dollars into our community banks, which I've done as vice president, through cooperation and partnership with some of the big banks and tech companies to get more access to capital for our entrepreneurs, for our businesses. We've done that. So we should never sit back and say, okay, I'm not going to vote because everything hasn't been solved. I share a desire that everything should be solved, by the way. I think it is what we should all want. But that shouldn't stand in the way of us also knowing we can participate in a process that's about improving things. And by voting in this election, you have two choices. Or you don't vote, but you have two choices if you do. And it's two very different visions for our nation. One mind that is about taking us forward and progress and investing in the American people, investing in their ambitions, dealing with their challenges. And the other, Donald Trump, is about taking us backward.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
That's what we're saying now?
Yes, we can say that.
Yeah. Reverend Solomon Kinlock Jr., I want you to meet him. He is the senior pastor of Triumph Church. Where's Reverend Kinlock?
Oh, he's here.
Come on, tell Secret Service, move out the way. It's okay. It's just the Reverend. Yeah, all right.
Hey, Reverend.
What's up, Reverend?
Madam Vice President Charlemagne,
Yes,
thank
sir.
y'all for being in Detroit tonight.
Thank you.
Recently, Madam Vice President, by one of Trump's surrogates from the black faith-based community, you've been criticized by him and others for your lack of engagement to the black church. Knowing that the black church is an unrivaled place in the heart of black people, what could you speak to as it relates to a future Harris administration, how you would partner with the black church to address some of the urgent needs of the black community? Dr. King talked about the fierce urgency of right now, and as a church, Triumph Church is in that place.
So first of all, that allegation, of course, is coming from the Trump team, because they are full of mis and disinformation, because they are trying to disconnect me from the people I have worked with and that I am from, so that they can try and have some advantage in this election, because otherwise they have nothing to run on. I grew up in the black church. I grew up attending 23rd Avenue Church of God in Oakland, California.
That's church.
Yes, that is church. My pastor is Amos C. Brown of Third Baptist Church in San Francisco, California.
Yes.
I have, throughout my career and as vice president and recently, been actively engaged in the church and church leaders, not only so we can share in fellowship, but so we can share in what we can do together that is about supporting the community, the strength of the community, the cohesion of the community. And it is my long-standing work, and therefore my pledge going forward, I will always work closely with the church, because I understand who our church leaders are and who the congregation is. We are talking about people who are driven by faith and the ability to see what is possible. By faith, where I was raised, and I know many of us were, understanding that our God is a loving God, that our faith propels us to act in a way that is about kindness and justice and mercy, that is about lifting one another up. And let's talk about the contrast here. Donald Trump and his followers spend full time trying to suggest that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, which is absolutely contrary to the church I know.
He sells Bibles, though.
Where our church and my church is about saying true leadership, the measure of that is based on who you lift up. And and then he's selling $60 Bibles or tennis shoes, and trying to play people as though that makes him more understanding of the black community. Come on.
Man, she is cooking.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you for the correction.
Thank you, Reverend.
And God is good.
Again.
Every day, all the time.
There you go. I had to make sure you get that right.
All right, more with Charlemagne the God and Vice President Kamala Harris. Sit down yesterday with the Breakfast Club when the Ron Show returns here on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn. All right, I only have about 6 minutes left of today's Ron Show, which I really hate because there's a lot of great audio from yesterday. Sit down with Charlemagne the God, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the Breakfast Club. Let's move right on clip 7.
So why is it okay for him to say he'll lock up his political opponents, but it's not okay for y'all to say he should be in prison when he's actually committed crimes?
Oh, I've been very clear. I think that the court should handle that, and I'm going to handle November.
The court should handle that, okay? Let's go to Talk Back, Eddie. What we got?
President Harris. Our men and women in the military are sent to foreign countries to fight for their freedom. Win or lose, Donald Trump has promised to seek revenge. My question is, will our military be there to fight for our freedom after the election should Trump start another insurrection?
Well, you raise a profound point that is very much a part of this election cycle in terms of what the American people have a choice right now. So, January 6th, Donald Trump incited a violent mob to try and undo the will of the people and undo the results of a free and fair election. That violent mob attacked the United States Capitol. Over 140 law enforcement officers were injured. Some of them were killed. And he has said since then that there will be a bloodbath after this election. He has, on your point about the military, referred to members of our military as suckers and losers. which is why, by the way, do see the number of military leaders who worked under his administration who are supporting me. And I will point out what everyone knows, which is that the people who worked the closest with Donald Trump when he was president, worked with him in the Oval Office, saw him at play in the Situation Room, his chief of staff, 2 secretaries of defense, his national security advisor, and his former vice president, have all said he is dangerous and unfit to serve. Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, most recently articulated exactly that point. And again, you know, here's Charlemagne, one of the things that I think is really ironic but at play. Donald Trump, through his way of trying to name call and demean and divide, tries to project as though those things are a sign of strength, when in fact the man is really quite weak. He's weak. It's a sign of weakness that you want to please dictators and seek their flattery and favor. It's a sign of weakness that you would demean America's military and America's service members. It's a sign of weakness that you don't have the courage to stand up for the Constitution of the United States and the principles upon which it stands. This man is weak and he is unfit.
There is more on that conversation, by the way. I'm going to give you the entire link that you can see via YouTube in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Let me skip ahead one more time.
I want to bring in my guy, Icewear Vezo. He's very politically engaged. Vezo!
Charlemagne, what's up? Madam Vice President.
How you doing
today? So yesterday I read that there is a new opportunity agenda, a plan for black men, which includes a proposal of forgivable loans up to $20,000 for 1 million black entrepreneurs. What would you say to the people that would consider the timing of this proposal as political timing? And how would you speak to the sentiment that support for black men is only sought out during election cycles and feels that building trust requires consistent engagement and genuine investment into the community outside of election periods and political benefits for politicians, and may view that some people in the Democrat Party use black Americans to play identity politics?
I've been in this race about 70 days. You can look at all my work before those 70 days to know that what I'm talking about right now is not new and is not for the sake of winning this election. This is about a long-standing commitment, including the work that I've done as vice president and before when I was senator and before that. In fact, a lot of what I'm doing that is about my economic agenda and opportunity economy was born out of the work I did as vice president, before that as senator most recently, to get access to capital for our entrepreneurs. The work that I did in the Senate was about getting a couple billion more dollars into our community banks, and then building on that when I became vice president. I created, it's called the Economic Opportunity Council, bringing in some of the biggest banks and technology companies to put more into the community banks. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why, because I have been aware for years, black entrepreneurs only get 1% of venture capital funding. We don't have the same rates of access to capital, be it through family or through connection, which is why I've done the work of putting billions more dollars and working to put billions more dollars into community banks, which go directly to the community. And oftentimes we find that when black entrepreneurs and black people apply for credit, they're denied at a higher rate than others. We have also seen, and the data proves this, that all of the realities also tend to dissuade black folks and black entrepreneurs in particular from even applying for credit. So my point is to work on every way that we can approach the issue to encourage people and to invest in their ambition. Because I know the ambition is there. I know the talent is there. I know the innovation is there. And certainly the hard work ethic. So this is not new work for me. And
you should speak to the American Rescue Plan, too, because, I mean, tens of millions of dollars. I know small businesses in North Carolina, small black businesses that got tens of millions of dollars because of that. I don't hear you speak to that.
That's right. And that was from the first time, from when we first came in. Mm-hmm. The American Rescue Plan, the work that we have done, the infrastructure bill. I mean, part of that is we made a decision that we were going to increase the number of federal contracts that go to historically underrepresented businesses. This was way before I was running for this, years ago. Mm-hmm. So this is not new work.
fantastic answer and a question that a lot of folks have been asking, fairly or unfairly. Anyway, that's going to do it for The Ron Show. We'll have all of that in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Replays 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 to midnight tonight at Progressive Voices via TuneIn, and wherever you podcast. And back tomorrow, 9 a.m., America One Radio. We'll see you then. Have a great day.